Hello everyone, welcome to Michigan Man MTG, and today we're back with the latest Magic the Gathering Avatar The Last Airbender previews. We got these cards on Thursday, and they're the cards that we got from the Avatar The Last Airbender beginner box, which is designed to help new players learn the game. So the box contains kind of two cards. It contains cards that are from the Avatar Last Airbender set that we will be playing with in Standard, but it's also got Commander cards, or what they're calling Eternal cards, in it as well. So for our purposes, we care about Standard, so I'm going to look at the cards today that are the most relevant for Standard and Limited when it comes to Avatar The Last Airbender. But before we dive in, remember to like and subscribe to get further content like this through Avatar The Last Airbender preview season and beyond. So let's dive into today's preview. So we got one rare, and that's Hakona, Selfless Commander for 3 and a white mana. You can legendary creature that's a human warrior ally and is a 3/5 with vigilance. And you may look at the top card of your library anytime, and you may cast ally spells from the top of your library. And you can sacrifice Hakona. Creatures you control get +0/+5 and gain indestructible until end of turn. So I think this is a card that if there is an ally deck in Standard that does develop, I think this is a card that'll be included in it, because you can look at the top card of your library, you can cast those allied spells from the top of your library, and if your opponent goes and board swipes, is going to try to do a board wipe on you, you can always sacrifice Hakona to protect everything else and give them +0/+5, which even the spells that are cast that give minuses to your creatures, they're probably going to survive those as well. So I think Hakona in an ally deck is a card that we're going to see played in Standard. Alright, so let's look at the lower rarity stuff we got from the beginner's box. So first we got Master Paku for 1 and a blue mana, legendary creature, human advisor ally, 1/3 with prowess. And that is the thing that I'm most interested in here, is that we lost Monastery Swiftspear. So we're looking for a card in our blue-red decks to replace Monastery Swiftspear, and maybe Master Paku could be that card. Now, whenever Master Paku becomes tapped, target player mills X cards, where X is the number of lesson cards in your graveyard. So you would have to be playing this, if you care about the milling, you'd have to be playing lessons. And there are going to be, I'm assuming, a few lesson cards that are actually Standard playable in blue and probably red or blue and white. So I think it'll be okay, and you'll be able to force your opponent to mill some cards at different times. But for me, the big thing is Master Paku has prowess and is a 1/3, so it's going to be harder to kill Master Paku. And because of that, I think there's an outside chance in a prowess deck that Master Paku sees play. Next, we've got Serpent of the Past for 5 and 2 blue mana. You get a creature that's a serpent and is a 6/5. If there are 3 or more lesson cards in your graveyard, you may cast this spell as though it had flash, and the spell costs 1 less to cast for each non-creature, non-land card in your graveyard. So we've seen over the last 2 years a number of blue spells, blue creatures that are just like this, and they're seeing play in blue spells decks. So I would assume this is a card that will slot right into those and give it a third creature that you're going to be probably able to cast relatively easily for 2 mana in the early to mid part of the game. So definitely a card we're going to see in Standard. Next, let's look at the white cards from the box that are interesting for limited purposes more than Standard. So first is Aang the Last Airbender for 3 and a white mana, legendary creature, human avatar ally, 3/2 with flying. And when Aang enters the battlefield, airbend up to 1 other target non-land permanent, which means you get to exile it. While it's exiled, its owner may cast it for 2 rather than its mana cost. And whenever you cast a lesson spell, Aang gains lifelink until end of turn. 4 mana for a 3/2 with flying, even though it's going to remove at least temporarily something from the battlefield. Probably not good enough for Standard, but definitely a good card in Limited. Next, we've got Master Piando for 4 and a white mana. You legendary creature that's a human warrior ally and is a 4/4 with first strike. And whenever a Master Piando attacks, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal an ally, equipment, or lesson card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order. So I think in Limited, a very good 4/4 first strike. And every time you attack, you could look at the top 4 cards and hopefully get something out of that every single time. So it's giving you card filtering and with card draw there. I think in Limited, it's going to be a very good card. 5 mana in white probably is not going to be good enough, though, for this to see standard play. Next, we've got some blue cards, and the first is First Time Flyer for 1 and a blue mana. You get a human pilot ally. That's a 1/2 with flying, and this creature gets +1/+1 as long as there is a lesson in your graveyard. So potentially a 2 mana 2/3 with flying. Yeah, very good in Limited. Probably won't see standard play, but a good Limited card. Next, we've got Iguana Parrot for 2 and a blue mana. Again, a 2/2 with flying and vigilance and prowess. So very vanilla, but it's got flying, it's got vigilance and prowess, which are all really good abilities. Good Limited card, and maybe has an outside chance of seeing a little bit of standard play. Next, we've got It'll Quench Ya for 1 and a blue mana. You get an instant, that's a lesson. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 2. You know, we've seen versions of this card be very relevant to standard over the last several years. So I would think that because it's a lesson and because there are so many cards in the Avatar set that care about lessons, that It'll Quench Ya probably see some standard play. Next, we have Katara Bending Prodigy for 2 and a blue mana. You can legendary creature that's a human warrior ally and is a 2/3. And at the beginning of your end step, if Katara is tapped, put a +1/+1 counter on her. So I think that's not going to be very hard for us to do, whether she's attacking or crewing something or stationing something in standard. I think the ability to, in essence, every single turn get a +1/+1 counter on her is probably going to be attainable fairly consistently. And then also you can Waterbender for 6, which means you get to draw a card, and while paying the waterbending cost, you can tap your artifacts and creatures to pay to help that, and you get, and one of those is going to be equal to 1 mana for every one you tap. So if Katara, is in, say, a deck where we've got a number of artifacts, we can just tap those artifacts to help get to that 6 requirement to go ahead and draw that card. And I think that in the right build has some standard playability. In Limited, I think it will be a very good card. Next, we've got some black cards for the day. And the first is Cat Gator for 6 and a black mana. You get a Fish Crocodile, that's a 3/2 with lifelink. So on the surface, they're not a great card. 7 mana for a 3/2, but it has this. When this creature enters the battlefield, it deals damage equal to the number of swamps you control to any target. So most likely your opponent. And if you're casting this in a mono black deck, you might have 7 swamps in play at this point. So when you do, you're going to do 7 damage to your opponent. And because Cat Gator has lifelink, you're going to gain 7 life as well. This is Grey Merchant of Asphodel for a couple of extra mana, and you get the lifelink effect on it. So I think in Limited, playable, and maybe a copy or 2 in the right black build in standard. Next, we've got Corrupt Court Official for 1 and a black mana. Human Advisor, 1/1. When this card enters the battlefield, target opponent discards a card. So our typical discard a card when this creature comes into play. Card from this set. And again, in Limited, it'll definitely see play. And if we do have a discard deck in standard, then it has a chance to see some play in that. Next, we've got Dai Lin's Indoctrination for 1 and a black mana. You get a sorcery, that's a lesson. And this one is a flexible card. First, you get to choose one of these 2. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land permanent card from it. That player discards that card. or you get to Earthbend too. So depending on the circumstances, you can get rid of a card in your opponent's hands that is problematic, that's a permanent card, or you get to Earthbend too to turn one of your lands into a 2/2 creature. So definitely, limited playable, and may have some outside chance of seeing some standard play again because it's a lesson. Next, we've got Epic Downfall for 1 and a black mana. You get a sorcery, exile target creature with mana value 3 or less. So very good card for standard because you get to exile the card. So we know of the VV problem we have right now in standard. This would exile VV. And because of that, I think it's definitely something that is very good and limited, and we'll see some standard play. Next, we've got Fire Nation Engineer for 2 and a black mana. You get a Human Artificer, that's a 2/3 with Raid, and at the beginning of your end step, if you attack this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on another target creature or vehicle you control. So, we usually see the +1/+1 counters being put on things like at the beginning of combat if you attack. Well, this one does it at the beginning of your end step, but I don't think that matters a whole lot. But this is a way for black decks to put +1/+1 counters on their creatures or vehicles, and I think that's worth considering in standard. And next we've got a reprint, which is Heartless Act for 1 and a black mana. You get to choose 1, destroy target creature with no counters on it, or remove up to 3 counters from target creature. So Heartless Act is going to see standard play because you can destroy any creature that doesn't have counters on it. So that is a, kill all of your opponent's avatars or anything else you can think of that has a large creature on the battlefield. It'll kill all of those. Or if you need to use it because you need to remove counters from something, this is a good card that's going to be able to do that for you. So definitely a card great in limited and very good in standard. Next, we've got Hog Monkey for 2 and a black mana. You get a Boar Monkey, that's a 3/2, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it gains menace until end of turn, and it's got Exhaust for 5 mana. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on this creature. So this is a card that I think we'll definitely see limited play because we've got a lot of different ways in the set already that are going to put +1/+1 counters on things, and this is just something that adds some benefit to having those +1/+1 counters by giving the creature menace. Next, we've got Ozai's Cruelty for 2 and a black mana. You get a lesson, and Ozai's Cruelty deals 2 damage to target player, and that player discards 2 cards. So 3 mana, deal 2 damage, and your opponent has to discard 2 cards. Certainly limited playable, and maybe has an outside chance of seeing play in standard. Next, we've got some red cards, and the first is Fire Sages for 1 and a red mana. You get a creature that's a human cleric and a 2/2. It has Firebending of 1, and whenever this creature attacks, you get to add 1 red mana. This mana lasts until the end of combat. And for 1 and 2 red mana, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. And for 1, 2 red mana, you can put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So it's helping to create during combat, and we're going to see a number of cards throughout the set that are Firebenders that are going to give you extra mana during your combat step. I think there's enough of them that we may have a critical mass of them that we might actually see a Firebending deck where you're attacking with stuff, and then while you're attacking, you're able to do other things that are going to benefit your side of the board. Next, we've got How to Start a Riot for 2 and a red mana. You get an instant, that's a lesson, and target creature gains menace until end of turn, and creatures target player controls get +2/+0 until end of turn. So this is a red combat trick that's a lesson, but it's giving all of your creatures +2. We don't typically see that for this low cost in red. So I think in limited, definitely a card I'd want to play because I can give my best creature menace and require them to block with at least 2 creatures. And then everything else gets that +2, which is relevant in the mid to late game. Next, I've got Lightning Strike, which is another reprint. 2 mana, instant. Lightning Strike deals 3 damage to any target. Very good card. We see it played all the time in Standard. Next, we've got Zuko, Exiled Prince for 3 and a red mana. You get a legendary creature. That's a human noble. It has Firebending of 3, so you get 3 mana when you attack. That's going to last until the end of your combat. And Zuko, ironically, or importantly, can spend 3 mana and exile the top card of your library, and you may play that card this turn. So the way I'm looking at this is Zuko becomes, hey, I get to exile. If nothing else, I attack with Zuko. I get those 3 mana. I use that mana to exile the top card of my library, so I get another card to play this turn. And as a 4/3, I think this is definitely very good in limited, and certainly I think has a little bit of standard playability. Next, we've got some green creatures, and the first is Badger Mole for 4 and a green mana. You get a Badger Mole. That's a 4/4, and when this creature enters the battlefield, you get to Earthbend 2. So you're getting 6 power and toughness across 2 cards when you play Badger Mole. And creatures you control with +1/+1 counters on them have trample. So anything that's got a +1/+1 counter has trample. And I think in limited, that makes us a very desirable card to play. Next, we've got Flopsy, Boomy's Buddy for 4 and 2 green mana. You get a legendary creature that's an ape goat and a 4/4. And when Flopsy enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So these 2 cards synergize well together. And each creature you control with power 4 or greater can't be blocked by more than 1 creature. So that's going to take away the ability of your opponent to double block in limited. So I think, in combination, I think these are 2 really good limited cards for you. Next, we've got Haru, Hidden Talent for 1 and a green mana. You get a legendary creature that's a human peasant ally and is a 1/1. And when another ally you control enters the battlefield, you get to Earthbend 1. So if we do have an ally deck and it happens to be in green, this is going to allow you to, target land you control becomes a 0/0 creature with haste that's still a land. Put a +1/+1 counter on it. When it dies or is exiled, return it to the battlefield tapped. So I think, the ability to kind of make all of your lands creatures with Haru, I think makes some sense in an ally deck where you're really trying to grow wide, and this is a good way to do that. Next, we've got Ruckus Audience for 1 and a green mana. You get a human citizen, that's a 2/1, and you can tap it to add green mana. And if you control a creature with 4 power or greater, you can add 2 mana instead. So I think, again, limited card, playable to add some extra green mana to your mana pool. Won't see play in standard because we do have Lyanna War Elves. All right, next we've got Rocky Rebuke for 1 and a green mana. It's an instant, and target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature an opponent controls. Your typical green removal spell in limited. And next we have Toph the Blind Bandit for 2 and a green mana. You get a legendary creature that's a human warrior ally. And Toph's power is equal to the number of +1/+1 counters on lands you control, and her toughness is 3. And when Toph enters the battlefield, you get to Earthbend 2. And again, target land you control becomes a 0/0 creature with haste that's still a land. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. When it dies or is exiled, return it to the battlefield tapped. So again, Toph is one of those cards that I think is potentially a really, really broken card if you can Earthbend consistently, where you can get her power up to 6, 7, 8 by just earthbending a few times. And because of that, that's going to be really important if a deck develops around the earthbending ability. All right, so let's look at some multicolored cards from the day as well. The first is Abandoned Attachment for 1 and either a blue or a red mana. You get a lesson. That's an instant. You get to discard a card, and if you do, you get to draw a card. So this is on a lesson, a card that we already have multiple copies of in Standard. And the fact that it's an instant spade is very nice. So you can do it on your opponent's turn. You discard a card, you draw 2 cards, and in essence, it's allowing you to leave up, counter magic if you need to, and then on their end step, you can do this. And we do know we've got a number of decks that really do want to get cards into their graveyard. We talked about the Serpent from earlier, where what we're trying to do is build up our graveyard with cards, so that way we can reduce the casting costs of things. So I think Abandoned Attachment is a card that has some relevance in that style of deck, or any deck that's really trying to burn through cards quickly and get those prowess triggers on your creatures. Next, we've got Earth Village Ruffian for 2 and a black or a green mana. You get a creature that's a human soldier rogue and is a 3/1. And when this creature dies, you get to Earthbend 2. And again, in limited, I think this is a solid card, 3/1. So you're going to be able to attack for some damage, kill some things. Eventually it'll get killed by anything that's blocking it. But the big point here is that when it does die, you do get to Earthbend. So you get to replace it, in essence, on the battlefield with a 2/2. And in limited, that's a good ability. All right, next we've got Haibong, Spirit of Balance for 2 and either a white or a black or a 1 white and 1 black. You get a legendary creature that's a bear spirit and is a 3/3. And whenever Haibong enters or attacks, you may sacrifice another creature or artifact. If you do, put 2 +1/+1 counters on Haibong. When Haibong leaves the battlefield, put its counters on target creature you control. So I think in limited, this is going to be a solid card. And you're going to end up, going ahead and in certain situations, sacrifice things. And we do have our Orzhov sacrifice deck currently seeing play in Standard. So maybe this is a hot top end card in that, because it's another automatic sack outlet. And again, that just gives the deck a little bit more resilience by having another sack outlet. Next, we've got Longfang, Grand Secretariat for 1 and either a black or green mana or a black or green mana. And it's a legendary creature that's a human advisor and a 2/3. And whenever another creature you control or a land you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. So you can grow Longfang, or you can grow some other creatures. And in limited, that's a very solid ability. When things die, you're going to be able to grow either Longfang or another creature you control. So I think that is a solid ability for the limited format. Probably not going to see play in Standard, because we've already got 2 mana cards that do this that aren't really seeing a lot of play. Next, we've got Saka, Lateral Strategist for 1, and again, either a white or blue, that hybrid mana symbols, legendary creature, human, ally, warrior, and is a 2/4 with vigilance. And whenever Saka and at least 1 other creature attacks, you get to draw a card. So Saka, every time you're attacking with them, as long as you attack with 1 other card, that's going to draw you a card. And to me, that's very playable. Not only in limited, but I believe it has a chance to see play in Standard as well. Next, we've got Suki, Kyoshi Warrior for 2, and then our hybrid green-white mana. In 2 of those, you're going to have to pay for a legendary creature that's a human warrior ally and is a X power and 4 toughness. Suki's power is equal to the number of creatures you control. Okay, think Adeline from the Last Innistrad set. And whenever Suki attacks, create a 1/1 white ally creature token that's tapped and attacking. So it's Adeline for 1 more mana without vigilance. So less powerful, but again, if we're playing a go wide strategy, may have some Standard playability. In limited, it's going to be a very, very powerful card. That is our card previews from Thursday's Beginner's Box previews that we saw. So I think from the overall approach of this set, I think this is going to be an exciting set to play with a lot of different mechanics, a lot of different abilities, and I feel like, based on what we've seen so far, there's going to be a lot of playable cards from the set, and that'll, hopefully help shake up Standard just a little bit from the kind of Vivi format that it's become currently. And maybe we'll get lucky. Vivi will be banned at some point and reduce that, get rid of that menace from Standard. Or we'll see something else in that deck get banned at some point. All right, so those are our previews for today. Thanks for staying to the end of the video. And remember to like and subscribe to get further content like this through Avatar: The Last Airbender preview season and beyond. Thanks. I'll see you in the next one.